Hey, welcome to another remote sensing series of how to use ENVI for your projects. Just going to show you how to do the land surface temperature for Landsat 8, 9. For this one, actually 7 as well, 7, 8, and 9, because they already contain the thermal band. So I'm going to start by opening up my image. And so I will start with my most recent image. And I'm going to open up the multispectral image because what I want to do with this is I'm going to be using the multispectral data to start with, and then I'm going to move into the thermal. So we need to take account the vegetation as well. So we're going to have our starting image here that comes up, and we are going to do a radiometric calibration. So I'm going to go over to my toolbox and type in radiometric. And I'm going to get my window. So my input raster is my multispectral data. So I'm going to highlight that, and I want all of my bands in there. Now the calibration type that I am going to set, which is here, is for radiance, and I'm going to change it to reflectance. So there's three options here. So it's a top of atmospheric reflectance is what I would like. And then my output raster is going to be the actual, I'm going to save it in the spot that I need to. So we're going to put it here. And this is going to be my land surface temperature. And my answer for this one, I'm going to call it my reflectance. You could also start with the date if you prefer. So in my case, I would have my July 23, or I think it's 23, 2023. It's not 20, it's not past 2027 yet. And then I can call it my reflectance. So then I can press save and then OK. So it's going to take a moment to calibrate. It always does, just because it's such a large image with 7 bands. And so while it's executing, one of the things that I'm going to bring in is a resized image, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually chop this down into a smaller section. So I'm just going to bring in one of my resized, just to start with that. So there's my resized. I'm just going to say open. And now I can resize my result at this point. And so I'm going to resize my reflectance, and I'm going to say spatial subset. And I'm going to click the subset by raster button, and I'm going to use the resized. So it's going to set it right in the spot that I need it. I can press OK. And this one is going to be back in my LST. And I'm just going to say resized or RS. Press OK. It's going to cut it down for me. So now I've got a smaller image, and I can get rid of these two that's on there. So now with my data being much smaller, and I'm going to remove these big ones here so I can actually zoom in. So I have my data here. Now I am going to apply an NDVI algorithm to this image. So I'm going to put in my resized reflectance because I'm going to use the values from there. Press OK, and I'm going to save this one as using my date. Okay, and this is going to be reflectance NDVI, so that we know exactly what we've done to it. We hit save and OK. So now I've got my NDVI, which is going to give me an indication of the vegetation that is on this surface. And then I'm going to go over to my layer manager. I'm going to right click on the layer, and I'm going to say quick stats. In the quick stats, the important information is this minimum and maximum. So there's a couple ways you can do this. You can bring up your snipping tool, and just because you're going to have to type it out later, and we just need these values here. So now that I've got those saved, I'm just going to move them off of the screen for now because I don't need them at the exact moment. But I need those minimum and maximum values in order to do this. This is best done with the resize image because then you're not dealing with the borders. So if you're finding you're getting a really weird answer with your with your results, then that is likely what has happened. So it's just because it's using the edges of the values rather than in the center. So if you're getting like -1 and 1, you might want to resize that reflectance so you can get these other values. So now we're going to go to the toolbox and we're going to type in bandmath. And we're going to go to bandmath. So now we're going to start setting up our expressions. So the first one we're trying to calculate is our PV, which is using the NDVI values. So I'm going to put a couple brackets in here, and I'm going to have B1, which is going to be the reflectance NDVI that I have used. Then I'm going to use subtraction, and this is where the minimum value is going to come in. So I'm going to use this minimum value. And I need to keep that negative. So I'm just going to use brackets around this. I'm going to say -0. Whatever your value is. So don't use my value because it will not work for you. Oh, I have too many 6s. And then, so I close that bracket, and then that is the numerator. And then I'm going to divide by my maximum minus my minimum. So again, I'm going to look here and I'm going to find my maximum value and my minimum value, and that's what's going to go on the bottom. So I'm going to put my maximum value first, and then I'm going to use my minimum value. So just to double check that the numbers look correct before I go any further. And then I'm going to close all of that, and I'm going to square it. I'm going to hit add to list. If you get an error, it's probably because there's a bracket missing somewhere. That's always the pickiest thing when it comes to programming. So this is a type of programming that we're doing here. So now you can highlight that and press OK, and it's going to bring you into the variables that you're going to select. Now in here I'm going to use my reflectance NDVI as the band that we're going to calculate with. And my new image that I'm going to create is going to be my July, again using my date, and this is my PV. Press OK and OK. Now I have everything set up here, and now I've got my PV values. So the next step of this is to calculate E. So the expression for E is built-in values, and it's based on the calibration values of the sensor itself. So again, I'll just use B2 and plus. So these are the values that you would add. One's a scale factor, the other one is an additive factor, just like as if you're working with a line. And press OK. We highlight that, press OK. Now this time the B2 is the PV value. So I'm going to use this PV band, and now I'm going to save this as July, my date, and lowercase e. And then I press OK. And then I'm going to now go back to my calibration. So I'm going to go radiometric again. There's my radiometric calibration. And now I'm going to find my thermal band. So this is where I'm finally working with the thermal band. So I've done everything about what's actually on the land and land information, and based on the visible light and infrared light as well. Now I'm going to highlight my thermal band. Press OK, so that comes in. Now this one, I do want to start with my radiance, and I want to, and I go here again. So I'm going to use my thermal. I'm going to go back. So this is still the data, the input raster. I can actually subset it right away using the spatial subset. So I'm going to use my resized value. It could be any of them. Any of the ones that you've been doing the calculation with, any of them can work. So I just want to set it so it's only on that location. So if I do the resize at the beginning, I have to make sure I apply it at this point so that when I'm doing the calculation that that's only applying it to that same spot. So press OK. It's going to be radiance that we're calculating first. So now I'm going to go back in here. I'm going to have my date and then my thermal infrared, and this is radiance. Press save, and then OK. So now it's going to calibrate it. Now I have my thermal radiance. And then the second step is that I need to go back and do a different calibration with it. And so again, I'm going to go find my thermal. I'm going to go spatial subset, and I'm going to set my resize to it. So again, I have my little box there. I'm going to press OK. And now my radiometric calibration is going to be brightness temperature. So click brightness temperature, press the 3 dots, and I'm going to save this as my thermal infrared BT, so brightness temperature. Click save and OK. So now if we were to check the values of this top value, we're going to see that it is very large. So this is in Kelvin. So I want to change it so that it's not in Kelvin. So I go back to my toolbox, I type in band math, and my expression this time round is going to be my band, and it's going to be minus 273.15, which is the conversion to Celsius. Highlight that, press OK. And now what I'm going to do with this one is a little bit different because I want to be able to apply this math to several values. So I'm going to click map variable to input file, and I'm going to select my brightness temperature calibration file that I just did and press OK. And now it's going to apply it to both of them. So you can see that it applies it to the full file. Now I can click choose, and this time around, again using the same values here, underscore TIR, brightness temperature, C for Celsius. So now it's in Celsius. Press OK. There's a conversion. So now I can take a look again at this value. And now I can see 43 degrees. Now remember, this is surface temperature, it's not air temperature. I am in a hot area of the world here, so I wouldn't be surprised. And it's July, so it being a little bit higher makes sense to me. But there is one more step, and that is, again, it's just a calibration step. So now I'm going to go back to my band math, and I'm going to type in a new formula. So this time round, I'm going to have a B6. I'm just going to start with that value, divide by 1. Now the reason we're dividing it by 1, just keep it as a habit, because if you're working with these values later, then you won't, then you can actually adjust it. It depends on the sensor that you're working with. And then we're going to B7 and times, I'm going to put brackets here so that I can keep these together. Now this is a funny number, it's 14380. Just keep that number, that's the one that you need. That's the multiply, and then we're going to do A log of B8. So it's going to be B6 divided by 1, and that's all multiplied by B7 times B6 divided by 1,000 or 14,380. And then all of that's multiplied by A log of B8. So I add to my band math expressions, highlight it, and press OK. Now in this case, my B6 is going to be my Celsius that I just did, and I'm going to use the first band for it. My B7 is the radiance that I calculated down here, and I'm going to use the first band because I want to keep it in the same wavelength. And then B8 is my E, so that's the E value. Whoops, I just overwrote that. So let's go back. I need my radiance, and then B8 up here is my E. So the first one is your brightness temperature in Celsius. I have a funny feeling. Yeah, that brightness temperature in Celsius. The second one is my thermal infrared radiance value. And the third one is that E value that we calculated. So now I'm going to click choose. And now this time it is going to be my land surface temperature. So LST. So click open and OK. And you can see quite the change with this one. So now if I use my drop, I'm getting some negative values, which is interesting for July. So I might want to go back and check because that seems like it's very low. So there might be something that I did wrong in my math. I'm going to go back here And I might apply for B7. I'm going to say float. And try it with float, and then I'm going to try it again. So this is a troubleshooting technique that you can use if you are having any issues with it. So go back and check, and then I'm going to have land surface temperature 2. I can use my, and it's still negative. So obviously you can see the difference there. So I've done something wrong at some point along the way, but I can trust there. I've got 25 degrees for the water, and I've got 38 degrees for the land in the middle of summer. That sounds pretty good. This is unusual. I don't know what has happened there, so I'd have to go back and really look at everything just to double check, but you can see how these two are negative. And in July, that doesn't make sense. So something has gone on in that case, but that makes sense because it should be 25. But anyways, so that is how you do it. All right, and so that's for Landsat 7 through 9.